recall. I'm glad that you were here for the lesson because recall is usually the last thing that I ever work on with a dog. And the reason for that is because the dog has to have a really firm understanding of accountability. Recall is all on the dog's own volition of whether or not they want to return to you, right? And so if they are constantly breaking place, breaking sit, breaking down, participating in poor behaviors, then why is there any reason to come back to you when I'm always allowed to do whatever it is that I want to do, right? Let's go down into this field so that way we can kind of work on recall just a little bit. And then Anna, I would like you to choose a spot and to put Cooper into a down as we work with Arrow, and so that way to practice a little bit of impulse control. We are going to be working on some recall with Arrow. Right now, what would you say are some of your biggest challenges with his recall?
He gets very stubborn and rolls in the grass. Arrow, sit. And he will also just, if let's say I'm playing a game with him, like if he's not coming and at that point he doesn't have any tools on him, I'll run the other way. And he's like, oh, I know what you're doing, bye. And
run the other way after that. Okay, cool. So ground rule for recall. The way to have really amazing off-leash obedience is to always be on leash, right? We never want to phase out those tools. I think that a really common problem that some competition obedience people have in the dog sport world is that when you compete with your dog, you're not allowed to have tools, right? Yeah. So they're training the dog, no, sit. They're training the dog and they're like, wow, this is going great. I have a trial coming up in such and such amount of time. I'm curious to see what my dog will do, and so they remove the tools, right? Yeah. What does the dog do? The dog goes, okay, this is weird, you've never done this before. They do an obedience session or whatever it may be, and the dog doesn't do what they are supposed to do, and they know it, and then no correction follows, and the dog goes, okay, what's the difference in between all the times before and right now, right? And it doesn't take that long for the dog to understand, when I do not have tools on me, then I don't have to do the thing that you wanted me to do, right? So the way to really great off-leash control is to always be on leash. When can you know when to make that transition, right? That's the really hard part. And the answer to that is when you find yourself saying of just like, oh wow, I haven't had to use those tools in a while, right? But if you are consistently having to either use negative reinforcement to come back to you or to correct for behaviors, he's not ready to have that obedience, right? And just like we talked about in the room, replace him back into the sit. Sit. Good. Just like when we talked about in the room, do not give any commands unless you are ready to 100% enforce or reinforce and and have that accountability, right? So when it comes to recall, what are some of your recall practices that you do?
I put him in a lot of like sit and down stays, and then I'll just go around him in the field, and then I'll recall him, and then once he gets to me, I have him go in the front of me, and then like his rewards always chuck it. He loves to play chuck or tug. Yeah. Or I'll have him in like a stand stay. Or I'll let him free, but usually he knows that game by now. If I let him free and I have the chuck it, he's like, okay, I go a little bit ahead, then you recall me, and then it's like, great. Yeah. But it's really more so if he's like really, really free and he's really interested. It's more interesting than I am. Definitely. So.
Okay. So what I want you to do is, you know how we talked about negative reinforcement before? I want you to start layering that in over your recall. Start with short distance recall first. No, sit. Nope. Sit. Good. So start layering that over your recall, right? Start with short distances first, and what I want you to do at that very low level, what level are you working on right now?
He is on he goes between a 2 and a 3 right now.
A 2 and a 3? Okay. Then you might have to bump the e-collar down because that has 3 different levels, right? So on that very low level, what I want you to start doing is I want you to start layering in that negative reinforcement, right? And I want you to start doing that over all of the different commands, okay? Because just like we talked about that pressure on, pressure off, that's also gonna help with a lot of your other obedience problems, right? Just because I see that you're recommanding a lot of different commands over and over again, but if we simply give the dog a reason to go back into a behavior of their own volition to turn that pressure off, they're much less likely to disobey that command again, right? Because they know of that continuous pressure. So the first thing that I always start working on whenever I need a dog to have a more solid level of a recall is usually going to be just your sit stays to a recall. But I'm not always going to be recalling the dog. So for example, one of the things I'll do, I will say sit, and then I will take a few steps back. Good. Come back in, reinforce, walk back out. Good. Come back in, reinforce, and I don't know when I am going to recall the dog. At some point in time, I am going to be at the 6 feet or whatever it is, right? And then I'm going to say come. I am then going to press and hold continuous pressure, use leash guidance to bring the dog to me. Once the dog is to me and in the position that I want, right? Not overshooting me, not doing anything. I want the dog to come back into the front with me. Then once the dog does that, I will release pressure. Good. I will, right? So I don't know if the e-collar will be too high, but if you want to practice, you definitely can. Remember, the removal of pressure is reinforcing. Okay. So if he starts coming and you remove pressure partway through, you just reinforced that he no longer has a reason to complete the command. Okay. Right? Yeah. Okay, cool. So whatever you have to do to get him refocused in on you. Anna, did you hear all of that, of my explanation? Okay. It's also going to be the same thing for Cooper as well, and we already worked on that, so he'll have a good understanding, right? I'd recommend having the e-collar in hand, just so that way you have it ready and available. So there, good. And then you can move in and move out and reinforce, and then at some certain point in time, then recall him to you, right? And I'm gonna try not to be too distracting. So press and hold that continuous until he comes to you.
You're not gonna give him treats because it's so high?
Yeah.
Sit.
Good. Yeah. Do you ever use a touchpad?
Like a marker?
Yeah, I guess so. I use like a rubber feed bowl that's turned upside down.
Oh, to get like to put the front paws on?
Yes. Sometimes I would start making that the really clear picture. So for a while, I want you to reintroduce the recall as a certain criteria of behavior. That criteria is you are away from me, and when you come to me, I'm gonna say come or here, whatever it is. Once you come closer, I want you to come and put your front paws on that, right? But it depends on how you want your recall. For me, that's how I want my recall, because from the front, I can then switch to a heel, right? So it depends. If that works for you, I want you to start working on recall, about like a session or 2 per day. Each session needs to have 12 to 15 reps, right? Yeah. And utilizing that negative reinforcement of pressure and the specific criteria of behavior, because I see that he does have a tendency to want to go around you. Yeah. So start using your leash and bringing him very closely to you, right? What was that?
I held on until he was like in front of me, but he wasn't directly in front of me.
Yeah.
Sit. Good. Stay. Here.
Good. See, more reps like that, right? It's gonna take him a while. You see how he's trying to brush off the stem? It's because he's not usually used to having that, but that rep that you just did, that's like good rep number 1, right? You need more reps just like that, and it'll become more fluid over time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Arrow. Stay. Here.
Good. Very good.
Arrow. Sit. Sit. Stay. Here. Oh, sit. Yeah.
Yay! That's what we like. Alrighty. We're gonna cut it off for that one because that was a really good rep. We're gonna end it on that one, but that's the picture that you're looking for. Did you notice how that felt, how that looked?
He didn't look anywhere else.
Yes, so, and that negative reinforcement of the pressure is gonna be really, really valuable because it's a continuous communication line in between you and him. So what I would recommend for you is to start overlaying that onto all of your different commands. But you don't need to stay in that phase for forever, okay? After a while of doing that, I would say like maybe for like 5 or 7 days or so, then you can go back to just using a no and then using your tap tap on the e-collar or your continuous stim, right? Questions?
Should I put him to a long line at some point too?
I would definitely recommend that. Start first with your shorter because you need to shape that picture, because even with 6 feet, everyone knows the struggle of having your leash to use that leash guidance, right? Until he starts getting that clearer picture of coming to front or whatever it may be, then do not move to a long line. After that, 15, 18, 50 feet, whatever it may be, right? But super important for you, do not give the recall command unless you can enforce it, right? So all tools need to be on. And when I mean enforcement, I don't just mean with the e-collar, I also mean with the long line. Because if he blows off that e-collar stim, which a golden is, you know, he'll go through the pressure if he wants it, then he's gonna have that learning opportunity, right? All right, questions?
No, I think that's good.
No?
I mean, it's kind of silly, but it's like that I didn't kind of put those together before, but again, I'm not a trainer.
Exactly. No, I know. Alrighty.